It was the kind of thing I never thought would happen to me. You hear about it. Those stories where someone you love betrays you, and you think to yourself, that could never be me. My relationship is different. We're solid. I was like that. I was convinced that my wife, Emily, and I had something real, something unbreakable. But life, as it turns out, has a funny way of showing you just how fragile things can be. This all started in 2017, in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Atlanta. I was 34, still in the prime of my career, and life had been good to me. I was working in marketing, managing a team at a well-respected firm, while Emily, my wife of nearly 8 years, was a therapist running her own private practice. On the outside, we looked like the picture-perfect couple. We had a beautiful home, we traveled, we spent time with friends. People envied us. We made it look easy, like we were in sync with each other, both in life and in love. Emily was the love of my life. I had met her in college, and from the moment we connected, I knew I had found someone special. She was warm, kind, and always so present in everything she did. We had been through so much together, building a life, navigating the ups and downs of careers and family. We had our disagreements, of course, but nothing we couldn't talk through. At least that's what I thought. But things weren't perfect. No relationship ever is. I worked long hours, often coming home late from the office or staying up nights on business calls. And while Emily understood the demands of my job, I could tell there were moments when she wished I was more present. Maybe it was my fault. I thought that if I worked hard enough, I could give her everything we ever needed: financial security, the freedom to pursue her passions, the lifestyle we both dreamed of. But in doing so, I neglected the one thing she needed most from me: my attention. The cracks didn't appear overnight. At first, it was just little things. The occasional disagreement about household chores or her frustration when I'd cancel dinner plans because of an impromptu meeting. I'd brush it off, thinking that these were just the normal bumps in a long-term relationship. But those little things started to add up, and the tension between us grew without me really noticing. One evening, I came home late after a particularly exhausting day at work. I figured Emily would be in bed, but when I walked through the door, the lights were on, and there she was, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, her eyes fixed on the screen, like she was avoiding looking at me. It was strange. We used to talk about everything, share our day, but tonight it felt different. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "How was your day?" She looked up at me, but it wasn't the usual warmth I was used to. She gave me a faint smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It was good. Busy, you know." I sat down next to her, noticing the distance that had grown between us. I tried to make conversation, but it felt like pulling teeth. She seemed distracted, distant. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I didn't press it. After all, I was the one who had been so absorbed in work lately. I figured I just needed to make more of an effort. But that night, as I lay in bed beside her, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. I should have asked her what was bothering her. But instead, I just turned over and fell asleep, exhausted from the day. The next day, things didn't get any better. Emily was still distant. She wasn't angry, but there was a coldness in the air between us. She didn't respond the way she usually did when I tried to lighten the mood, and I could feel her withdrawing into herself more and more. I didn't understand it. What was happening? Why was she pulling away? I wanted to reach out to her, to talk about it, but I was afraid of making things worse. A few weeks later, it all came crashing down. I was away on a business trip when I received a call from Emily's best friend, Claire. The conversation was brief, but it sent a shock through me like nothing else ever had. "David, you need to talk to Emily," Claire said, her voice shaky. "She's been acting strange lately. She's not herself, and I think she's seeing someone else." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The words didn't make sense. Emily? My Emily? Couldn't be true. I didn't believe it. But at the same time, something in me stirred. Maybe it was the strange distance between us, the unspoken tension that had been building for months. I tried to push the thought out of my mind, but it kept creeping back. Could it really be happening? I called Emily immediately, my heart racing. "Hey, I just spoke to Claire. What's going on? There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when she finally spoke, her voice was cold, detached. David, I don't think this is working anymore. I think we need some space. I was in disbelief. What are you talking about? We're fine, Emily. We can fix this. We can talk about it. But she wasn't having it. She told me that she needed time to think, and that was the last thing she said before hanging up. I was left standing there, staring at my phone, unable to comprehend what had just happened. How had we gotten to this point? What had gone wrong? I thought we were building something solid. Was it all just a facade? When I got home, everything felt different. I was anxious, my mind racing with a million questions. Emily wasn't there. She had packed up some things and left. I didn't know where she had gone, but she left a note. It was short, simple. It said, "I'm sorry, but I can't keep living this lie." That was it. The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. She was gone. And in that moment, it felt like my whole world had been turned upside down. Couldn't breathe. I didn't know where to start. Was there someone else? Had she been seeing someone behind my back? I spent the next few days in a haze, desperately trying to piece together what had happened. My mind replayed every conversation, every glance, every moment I thought we were fine. Was there something I missed? Was there a sign that I didn't see? I was spiraling. I tried reaching out to her. I texted, I called, I emailed, but there was no response. It was as if she had vanished from my life completely. And then, a week later, I found out the truth. I went to Emily's office, hoping to catch her, hoping to talk face to face. When I walked in, I saw her sitting in her office, talking to a man I didn't recognize. They were laughing, sitting a little too close for comfort. He was touching her arm. She was leaning in, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. In that moment, it hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just pulling away from me. She had already moved on. It was like everything I thought I knew about our life together was a lie. Seeing Emily with that man, sitting so comfortably with him, laughing like I hadn't even existed, shattered something inside me. I could barely stand to watch it. I knew in that moment that I wasn't just losing her. I was losing everything I thought I could count on in this world. I stood there, frozen, watching them interact, trying to convince myself that maybe I was overreacting. But I couldn't shake the sinking feeling in my stomach. I didn't even know who this man was. He wasn't anyone I had heard her talk about. Was he someone from work? Or worse, had he been there all along, hiding in plain sight while I focused on my career, convinced we were fine? I waited until their conversation ended. Then I made my presence known. Emily looked up, her face a mask of surprise and discomfort. For a moment, neither of us said anything. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers right then and there. But all I could do was stand there, trying to breathe. "David, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tight. I looked at her, the hurt so raw I could barely get the words out. "I could ask you the same thing. Who is he?" Emily glanced over at the man, then back at me, her expression softening for just a moment. "This is Ben," she said, avoiding my gaze. "He's a colleague." A colleague. The word felt like it had been twisted. "It doesn't look like you're just colleagues." Emily shifted uncomfortably. She didn't deny it, didn't try to explain. "David, this isn't easy," she finally said, her voice faltering. I didn't mean for it to happen, but I've been feeling so alone lately, and Ben, he's been there for me." The room spun as I processed her words. "Alone? You've been alone." I couldn't stop myself. "I was here. I've been here every night. I worked for us. Everything we have is because I worked. I thought we were building something, Emily. I thought we were building a life together." Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't the tears of someone who was sorry. No, these were the tears of someone who had already moved on, who had already made up her mind. She shook her head slowly. "You don't get it, David. I was suffocating. You were never here. You were always at work. You left me behind." Her words hit me like a slap. I had known something was off, but hearing her say it like that, hearing her put it all on me, was a blow I wasn't ready for. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just her fault. I had been absent. I had been so focused on climbing the ladder that I didn't realize the person I loved the most was slowly slipping away from me. Ben stood up, sensing the tension in the room. "I'll give you two some space," he said quietly, before walking out of the room. I watched him go, my mind a blur. I couldn't stop staring at Emily, waiting for an explanation that would make sense. But nothing she said could change what I saw, what I knew in my gut. The trust had been broken. "I'm sorry," she said again, the words falling flat. "I never wanted to hurt you. But it's over, David. I'm done. Done." Those words, so final, echoed in my mind long after she said them. Couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. But the look in her eyes, the emptiness there, told me everything I needed to know. She was already gone, even if she was physically standing right in front of me. I left her office that day with more questions than answers, and I couldn't stop asking myself how I didn't see this coming. I thought we had something unshakable. I thought she loved me, that we had a bond that would withstand anything. But it wasn't enough. I wasn't ready to give up on us, though. Not yet. I told myself that if I could just find a way to make her see how much I cared, if I could just show her that I could change. Be there more, listen more. Maybe, just maybe, I could fix this. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Over the next few days, I tried to talk to her. I called, I texted, I even left her messages. But Emily was distant. The walls she had put up between us were now miles high, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't break through. She refused to answer my calls. She wouldn't respond to my texts. Every time I tried to meet with her, she'd make excuses or simply not show up. I was losing her, and I didn't know how to stop it. I decided to reach out to Claire, hoping she could shed some light on what had happened. Maybe she knew something I didn't. Maybe she could help me understand how things had spiraled so out of control. When I met Claire for coffee, she looked at me with sympathy. But there was something in her eyes that told me she knew more than she was letting on. "David, I wish I could tell you this was just a phase. But it's not," she said quietly. "Emily's been unhappy for a while. She's been struggling with feeling neglected. It wasn't just about Ben. It was about everything. About you not being there when she needed you." I nodded, the guilt gnawing at me. I had known it, hadn't I? Deep down, I knew something wasn't right, but I ignored it. I thought I could fix it later after just one more project, one more deal. But there was no more later. Claire continued. "She didn't just wake up one day and decide to be with someone else, David. It built up over time. She was trying to tell you. But, I don't know. Maybe you were too caught up in your own world to hear her." Hearing Claire put it all out there made the weight of everything hit me harder than I expected. Emily hadn't just fallen out of love with me. She had been crying out for help, and I had turned a blind eye. I sat there for a long time, staring at my coffee, unsure of what to say. But I knew what had to happen next. I needed to let Emily go. I had to. I couldn't keep holding onto a relationship that had already slipped through my fingers. But that didn't make it any easier. The days that followed were a blur. I moved through the motions, trying to get a handle on my emotions, but nothing made sense anymore. The house felt empty without her. The silence a constant reminder of what I had lost. I tried focusing on work, thinking it would distract me. But every time I sat down at my desk, my mind would wander back to her. Emily, the life we'd built, the promises we made. One evening, I decided to take a walk. I needed to clear my head. As I strolled through the neighborhood, I realized how much had changed. Everything felt different, like I was seeing the world through a new lens, a lens that was clouded with regret. I didn't know where things went wrong, but I knew that I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the mistakes I had made. But maybe, just maybe, I could learn from them. If you've ever been in a situation like this, you know how hard it is to let go of someone you've invested so much into. And that's why I want to hear your thoughts. If you've been through something similar, leave a comment and share your story. Maybe you'll find that you're not alone. And while you're here, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear this, and subscribe for more personal stories like this one. So, I didn't have all the answers, but I knew that moving forward meant accepting that the relationship was over. The hardest part wasn't losing Emily, it was losing myself in the process. But now, as I walked through the streets of our neighborhood, I realized it was time to find myself again. Time to rebuild. Maybe that's what this was all about. Learning to rebuild, even when everything you thought you knew falls apart. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to rebuild a new life. Ready to move on to the next chapter, I found myself wondering what the future would look like. Would I find love again? Could I ever truly trust someone the way I trusted Emily? Those were questions for another day. For now, I had to focus on me, on healing, on moving forward, and that, I knew, would take time. As the days went on, the reality of my new life settled in, and the weight of Emily's betrayal began to feel more like a constant companion than something I could ever fully escape. The more I tried to focus on work or distract myself with other things, the more my mind drifted back to her, what she had done, and how it had all fallen apart. I couldn't stop asking myself, what could I have done differently? I couldn't believe how quickly everything had changed. One moment I thought we were fine, building something together, growing old side by side, and the next I was standing in front of an empty house trying to figure out how I could fix the pieces that had shattered. The hardest part was the silence. The house that once echoed with laughter now felt like a tomb, each corner a reminder of the life we used to have. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living in this state of limbo. I had to either confront the truth or continue to let this sense of defeat wash over me. I decided to confront the truth. I couldn't just give up. I still loved her. The hardest part, though, was accepting that she might not feel the same anymore. Then one afternoon, the phone rang, and it was her. Emily. I froze. My mind raced. For the first time in weeks, she was reaching out to me. Could this be a chance to fix things? Maybe she wanted to talk. Maybe we could find a way to make things work again. Or maybe it was just another goodbye. I didn't know. But I wasn't ready to just let go. Not without a fight. Hello. I answered, my voice shaky. I hadn't heard from her in so long. I wasn't sure how to speak to her anymore, but I knew I had to say something. David, she said, her voice soft but tired. I need to talk to you. I wasn't prepared for the heaviness in her tone, but I knew this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. Okay, I replied, feeling my pulse quicken. What about? She paused for a moment as though gathering her thoughts. I don't want to do this over the phone, but I think it's time we meet. I owe you an explanation. I wasn't sure what she meant, but I knew I needed to see her. Even if it was just for closure, I had to understand. When? I'm free this weekend. Can we meet at the park like we used to? I'll be there at noon. I agreed. It was our spot. The place where we first met, where we would walk for hours just talking about our dreams and our future. I didn't know what to expect, but I felt like this was a chance, a small one maybe, to finally get the answers I'd been craving. The day came, and I made my way to the park, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea what she was going to say, but I had to know. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe forgiveness, maybe some kind of understanding. But I wasn't ready to walk away from her without at least hearing her out. I arrived at the park, and there she was, sitting on the same bench we used to sit on all those years ago. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, and there was something about the way she was sitting, hunched slightly forward, that made her seem smaller, as though the weight of everything had taken a toll on her. She saw me approaching and stood up, her eyes meeting mine. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence between us felt thick, like there was so much left unsaid. But then she spoke. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I never meant for things to end up like this. Her words were like a knife twisting in my chest. I had been holding on to the hope that somehow we could go back to what we had, but in that moment I realized something. I wasn't sure if I was still holding on to her, or if I was holding on to the version of her that existed before everything changed. I don't understand, I said, my voice strained. Why, Emily? Why did you do this? She sat down again, her hands trembling in her lap. David, I wasn't happy. Not really. I loved you, I thought I did at least, but somewhere along the way we lost ourselves. I thought I could deal with it. I thought I could handle it. But I couldn't anymore. I stood there for a moment trying to process her words. So what? You just left? You didn't even try to fix it? She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. I did try. I tried for so long, David. But you weren't here. You were always working. You always promised things would change, but they never did. The pain in her voice was evident, and I felt a stab of guilt pierce through me. She was right. I had been so focused on my career, so caught up in providing for us, that I forgot what really mattered. I thought if I just kept working hard enough, if I kept bringing in the money, everything else would fall into place. But I was wrong. I didn't realize. I started, but I didn't know what else to say. How could I fix this? How could I go back in time and make things right? She wiped a tear from her cheek and continued. I didn't want to hurt you, David, but I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep living like I was okay when I wasn't. I sat down beside her on the bench, the weight of her words settling in. I had tried to hold on, to salvage something from the wreckage, but now it felt like the truth had finally come out. Emily wasn't just emotionally distant. She had been breaking inside for a long time, and I had never seen it. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm asking for you to understand, and I'm asking you to let me go. For both of us. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her that I could change, that I could do better, that we could work through this. But I could see it in her eyes. She had already made up her mind. She had already let go. The moment hung in the air between us, thick with emotion, with everything we had built and everything we had lost. And finally I nodded. Okay, I said, my voice heavy with regret. I understand. We didn't say anything else after that. We just sat there, side by side, each of us lost in our own thoughts, letting the silence speak for us. I don't know how long we sat there, but eventually Emily stood up, wiping the last of her tears. Goodbye, David, she said softly before walking away. I watched her leave, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. I had lost her, but more than that, I had lost the version of myself that I used to be when we were together. I wasn't just grieving the loss of her. I was grieving the loss of the man I thought I was. The man who was successful, who was in control of everything, who had it all. But the truth was, I wasn't in control. I never had been. I had been so consumed by my own ambition that I forgot the one thing that really mattered, love. I stayed in the park long after she had left, sitting there alone, trying to process everything. Maybe, in some way, it was for the best. Maybe we both needed to move on and grow. But it didn't make the pain of it any easier to bear. This wasn't the ending I had imagined. It wasn't the ending I had hoped for. But it was the reality I had to face. Emily was gone, and I had no choice but to find a way to move forward without her. And that, I knew, would be the hardest part of all. It's moments like these that make you realize how much you take for granted, how easily things can slip through your fingers when you're not paying attention. But in this moment, as I sat alone in the park, I understood something else too. Sometimes, letting go is the only way to truly heal. Ready to move on to the next chapter? Don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Your thoughts and support mean the world. And make sure to subscribe for the next part of the story. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. As I sat there in the park, the weight of everything that had happened pressed down on me. Emily was gone. She had already made her choice. And while I had reluctantly accepted it, the pain of losing her was still fresh, gnawing at me every moment of every day. The hardest part wasn't just losing her. It was losing everything I had believed about myself, our relationship, and what the future held. I spent the next few weeks in a fog. I tried to move on, tried to focus on work, but it felt like nothing mattered anymore. The office, once a place where I felt accomplished and in control, now felt like an empty shell. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I found myself just going through the motions, showing up, doing the work, and leaving only to be consumed by thoughts of what had gone wrong. One night, when I found myself staring at the same old photos of Emily and me, memories of our life together rushing back like a flood, something inside me snapped. I had spent so long wallowing in the pain of the past that I realized I wasn't moving forward. I couldn't keep living in this cycle of regret. I had to make a decision. Either I keep letting the past define me, or I take control of my own future. That night, I called up some old friends from my college days. People I hadn't spoken to in years. I knew I needed to start reconnecting, building a life outside of the shadows of my past. The next morning, I found myself at a cafe with a friend, Chris, who had always been there for me during the highs and lows of my life. He looked at me with concern as I recounted the last few months. The pain, the betrayal, and the aftermath. "David, I know it feels impossible right now, but you're still here," he said, his voice steady. "You're still standing, and you'll get through this. You have to give yourself the chance to move forward." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, but in a good way. It was like a light bulb went off in my head. I had been too focused on trying to fix what was broken, on trying to make things right with Emily, when what I really needed to do was focus on myself. I couldn't change the past, but I could change how I moved forward. I could rebuild. I could reinvent myself. But that wasn't going to be easy. The first step was reaching out to Emily one more time. Not to win her back, not anymore, but to find closure. I needed to know where we stood, and maybe, just maybe, we could come to some kind of understanding. It was early evening when I texted her, unsure of what to expect. "Can we talk? I need to clear the air." To my surprise, she responded quickly. "Okay. Where?" We agreed to meet at a small cafe near her office, a neutral ground where we could talk without the pressure of being at either of our homes. When I arrived, I saw her sitting at a table by the window, her back to the door. She looked the same but different. There was a weariness in her posture, a sense of defeat that I hadn't seen before. I walked over to the table and sat down across from her. We exchanged a quiet, almost awkward greeting before the silence settled between us. "I didn't expect to see you again, David," she said quietly, looking down at her hands. I thought this was it." "Me too," I replied, my voice tight. "But I can't keep going without understanding what happened. I paused, trying to find the words. "We need to talk about it. We need closure." She nodded slowly, as though she had already anticipated this moment. "I know," she said softly, "but I don't know if we'll ever truly have closure. Maybe the truth is that we were never meant to last. Maybe we both just grew apart." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Was that really what she thought? That we were just destined to fall apart, no matter how hard we tried? I wasn't ready to accept that. "Emily, I don't think it was just that. There were things we didn't talk about. You were unhappy. I wasn't there. I see that now." Her eyes flickered up to mine, and for the first time in a while, I saw a glimpse of the Emily I once knew. The Emily who had trusted me, loved me, shared everything with me. "I didn't know how to tell you," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know how to make you understand that I needed something more. I needed you to be present. I needed you to see me." The weight of her words hit me hard. I had failed her. I had been so consumed by my career that I had ignored the most important thing in my life, her. The realization crushed me, but it also sparked something inside of me. I needed to do better. Not for her, but for me. For my own growth. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I failed you. I didn't see you the way I should have. I didn't listen, and I can't change that. But I need you to know that I'm working on being better. Not for you, but for myself." She looked at me, and there was a softness in her gaze that I hadn't seen in months. "I know you're hurting, David, and I don't want you to think I'm not sorry too. I am. But I think we both know that we're not the same people we were when we first met." I nodded. "I get that, and I'm trying to accept it. But I need to ask you, how do we move forward? How do we find peace with all of this?" She didn't answer immediately. She just sat there, staring out the window, as if weighing the question herself. Then finally she spoke. "I think we both need to let go. Not of each other entirely, but of the version of us that we've been holding on to. The love we had is still there, but it's not enough anymore. Maybe it's time for us to find new paths." It was the hardest thing I had ever heard, but it was also the most honest. Emily and I were not the same people we had been. We had changed, and maybe it was time for both of us to move on and grow separately. The conversation ended in silence, but this time, it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of earlier. It was quieter, reflective. And as I left that cafe, I realized that I had gotten the closure I needed. It wasn't the perfect ending I had hoped for, but it was real. It was the truth. In the days that followed, I began to focus on myself more. I started going to the gym, reconnecting with friends, and even pursuing some of the passions I had set aside for so long. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again. I wasn't there yet, not by a long shot, but I was on my way. But Emily wasn't the only one who had changed. I had too. The pain of losing her wasn't gone, but it was no longer consuming me. I had a long road ahead, and I didn't know where that road would lead. But for the first time in months, I felt like I had the strength to walk it. If you've been through a similar situation, you know how hard it can be to let go. If this story resonates with you, leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next part of the journey. You won't want to miss it. After that conversation with Emily, I thought I had it all figured out. I was moving on, or at least I was trying to. I started doing things for myself, things I hadn't done in years. It felt good to get back to my roots, to reconnect with the person I used to be before everything became about work and obligations. But as much as I tried to move forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. Despite the clarity Emily and I had reached, something was nagging at me, like an itch I couldn't quite scratch. I had started to look at the world differently. I realized that I wasn't just grieving the loss of her. I was grieving the loss of myself in the process of trying to be the person I thought everyone wanted me to be. I had focused so much on the things that didn't matter that I had completely lost sight of what did. I was trying to rebuild, but I still wasn't sure where I was going. I had to face the fact that maybe the change wasn't just about my career or about Emily, it was about me. About understanding who I was without the trappings of my past. That's when I realized I couldn't run from this anymore. I had to confront the mess I had made, and I had to do it on my terms. A week after my conversation with Emily, I was out for a run, just trying to clear my head, when I ran into Claire. I hadn't spoken to her much since everything had gone down, but I always knew she was there, a friend who had seen the good and the bad. She knew the person I used to be and the man I was trying to become. She was like a lifeline in a sea of chaos. "David," she said, her voice full of surprise as she jogged toward me. "I thought I might run into you around here. How are you holding up?" I stopped, catching my breath. You know, the usual, trying to figure things out one day at a time. She smiled knowingly. "It's tough, huh?" "Yeah," I said, glancing at the ground. I thought I was getting past it, but there's this nagging feeling that I'm not really moving forward. "Sometimes," Claire said, her voice steady, "you don't even realize how much you're holding on to until you're forced to let it go." Her words hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. She was right. I had been holding on to so much of the past, of who I thought I was supposed to be. And I hadn't even realized that I was suffocating under the weight of it all. I needed to let go. I needed to make peace with the past, with Emily, and with myself. "I've been thinking a lot about the past," I admitted, "and about how I let things slip away. I don't know if I'll ever get it back, but I think it's time I finally let go of all of it. All the guilt, the shame, everything." Claire nodded, a soft expression on her face. "It's hard, David, but it's also the only way forward." We chatted for a while longer, talking about everything and nothing. It felt good to finally have someone to talk to hear a perspective that wasn't clouded by the emotions of the past few months. Afterward, I left with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. Claire was right. I had to let go, not just of Emily, but of everything that had tied me to that version of myself. Later that evening, as I sat at home, something came over me. It was a kind of realization, a moment of clarity that I hadn't expected. I had spent so much time waiting for Emily to come back to me, or waiting for some cosmic sign that we were meant to be. But the truth was, I couldn't wait anymore. I couldn't keep waiting for life to unfold the way I wanted it to. I had to create my own path. If I wanted peace, I had to find it within myself. That's when I decided to make a move. I was going to take control of my future, whatever that meant. The next day, I called my boss, Mark. We'd had our differences in the past, but I knew that I had to put everything on the table. I had to be honest with him about where I stood, about how I'd been feeling, and how I was finally ready to take charge of my own life. "I need a change," I said when he picked up. "I'm stepping down from my position. I need to do something else. Something that makes me happy." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before he responded. "Are you sure about this, David?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, I've been running in circles for too long. I need to figure out who I really am. And I can't do that if I'm stuck in a job I don't love, working for a company that doesn't value me." I didn't know what would happen next. Maybe it was a risky move, maybe it was the wrong move, but I knew it was the right one for me. I needed to get out. I needed to live for myself, for once. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. I started searching for new opportunities, reconnected with old passions, and began thinking about the things that truly mattered to me. I still missed Emily. I still thought about her every day. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was building something new, something that was mine. But just when I thought I was starting to figure things out, I received an unexpected call. It was from Emily. "David," she said, her voice hesitant. "I don't know what you're doing, but I can't stop thinking about you." I didn't know how to respond. I had worked so hard to let go, to finally move on, and now it felt like everything was being thrown into question again. I wasn't sure if I was ready to open up that door again. The pain of our breakup still felt too fresh, but I couldn't help the spark of hope that ignited inside of me. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for us. "Emily, I don't know what to say," I replied, my voice tight. "I've been working so hard to move on. I've been trying to figure out who I am without you. And now you're calling me." There was a pause before she spoke again. "I didn't realize how much I needed you, David. I've been thinking about everything, about the mistakes I made. I've been looking at myself, trying to figure out where I went wrong. And I think I was wrong about so many things. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could fix things. But I also knew that I couldn't keep living in the past. I had changed, and I wasn't sure if we could ever go back to the way things were. I don't know if we can just pick up where we left off." "Emily," I said, my voice shaky with uncertainty. "I'm different now, and I think you are too." Her voice was soft, but there was a hint of sadness in it. "I understand, but I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For everything." I didn't know how to end the conversation. I didn't know what to say or what I was hoping for. But in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I had let go of the anger that had consumed me for so long. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Emily," I said quietly. "I really do." After we hung up, I sat there for a while, taking in what had just happened. I wasn't sure what the future held for us, but I knew one thing for sure. I had finally started living for myself. I was taking control of my life, of my future, and that, I realized, was the most important thing of all. If you've ever faced a tough breakup, you know how difficult it is to let go of someone you thought you'd spend your life with. But sometimes, letting go is the only way to move forward. If you've gone through something similar, share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more of this journey. Stay tuned, because the next chapter is just beginning. I thought I had reached a place of clarity, where I was finally in control of my own life again. I'd walked away from my old job, I had started focusing on my personal growth, and I thought I was beginning to heal. But that call from Emily, out of nowhere, shattered the fragile peace I had built for myself. Her voice echoed in my mind long after the conversation ended. "I've been thinking about everything, about the mistakes I made." She said she was sorry, but part of me was unsure if that apology was enough to fix what we'd lost. I spent the next few days in a haze, wrestling with conflicting emotions. My heart wanted to believe that maybe we could try again, that maybe this time we'd get it right. But my mind kept reminding me of the reasons we had ended up in this place in the first place. Trust had been broken. Too much time had been wasted. I needed space. I needed to think. I went back to the gym, hit the road for long runs, and spent quiet nights at home reading books I hadn't picked up in ages. But no matter what I did, Emily's words kept tugging at me. It was like I couldn't fully move forward without answering the question that lingered in the air between us. Could we rebuild what we once had? Or was the past too broken to mend? I finally decided that I needed to see her again. No more texts, no more phone calls. We needed to talk face to face. We had tried it all, communication through intermediaries, through the distance between us. But now it was time for the raw, uncomfortable truth. We needed to figure out where we stood once and for all. The day we agreed to meet, I could hardly breathe. The nerves, the anxiety, it all came rushing back. I wasn't sure if I was more afraid of the conversation we needed to have or the possibility of what might happen after. What if she didn't feel the same way? What if all the work I had put into healing had been in vain? When I arrived at the park, my heart pounded in my chest. It was the same spot where we had spent so many afternoons together, talking about our dreams, our future, about everything and nothing. And now it felt like a ghost of what it used to be. I spotted her sitting on the same bench where we used to sit, looking out over the water. She looked so different, so much older, more fragile, as though life had stripped her down to her bare essentials. When she saw me walking toward her, she stood up, her face a mix of anticipation and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "David," she said softly, almost hesitantly. She didn't move toward me, just stayed where she was, her hands clasped in front of her. "I didn't think I'd see you again. I didn't think I'd be here either," I admitted, standing a few feet away, unsure of how to close the distance between us. It felt impossible to bridge the gap that had grown between us. "But we need to talk. I don't think we can keep going like this, avoiding each other, pretending that we're fine." Emily nodded slowly, her gaze falling to the ground. "You're right. I've been avoiding you, avoiding myself, for too long." We both stood there for a moment, not speaking, but the tension in the air was palpable. I could feel the weight of everything between us. The years of love, the betrayals, the mistakes, and the overwhelming grief of what we had lost. I didn't know how to start, so I just did. "Why did you reach out to me, Emily?" I asked, my voice steady but raw. "You said you were sorry, but I don't know if that's enough. I don't know if I can just let everything go that easily." She swallowed, her eyes flicking up to meet mine. "I didn't expect you to. I didn't expect anything, really. I needed to tell you that I regret the way everything ended. I didn't know how to handle what we were going through, so I just shut down, pushed you away. I kept telling myself that I was better off, that I didn't need you. But I was lying. It was a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to shout at her for the years we had wasted, for the pain she had caused, but instead, all I could do was stand there and listen. I had so many questions, so many things I wanted to say, but I held back, because in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was just tired. "Do you still love me?" I asked, the question hanging in the air between us, heavy with meaning. Her eyes flickered, and for the first time, I saw something soft, vulnerable. "I don't know," she whispered. "I think I do. But I also think that love isn't enough anymore. Not after everything we've been through." My heart sank, but there was something freeing in hearing those words. I had been holding on to this fantasy, this idea that maybe we could somehow go back to the way things were. But the truth was we couldn't. We had changed. We weren't the same people we used to be, and maybe that was okay. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's not enough. But I can't keep living in the past, Emily. I need to move forward. I need to live for myself, for who I am now, not who I was when we were together." She nodded, her expression unreadable, but there was a softness in her eyes. "I understand. I think I need to do the same." There was no dramatic moment of clarity, no sudden revelation that we could magically fix everything. It wasn't like the movies, where the couple embraces and everything falls into place. Instead, it was a quiet moment, a moment of acceptance. We both knew that what we had was gone, and we couldn't bring it back. But we also knew that we didn't have to keep fighting it. We sat down together on the bench, side by side but not touching, the silence stretching out between us as we each processed everything we had just said. It wasn't a perfect ending. It wasn't the happily ever after we once dreamed of. But it was real. I think we both need some time, I said after a while, breaking the silence, to figure out who we are, apart from each other. I agree, Emily replied softly. We need to find our own lives again. We both stood up, and this time the silence felt different. It wasn't filled with anger or pain, but with the quiet understanding that we had reached the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. And that was okay. It was time to let go of the past and embrace whatever the future held, whether it was together or apart. As I walked away from her that day, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. I had finally come to terms with everything, accepted that some things are simply out of our control. I didn't know what the future would look like, but for the first time in months I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready to move forward, and that, I realized, was the greatest gift I could give myself. So, if you've ever faced a moment like this, where you have to let go of someone you thought you'd be with forever, know that you're not alone. Sometimes, the hardest part of moving on is accepting that it's time to let go. If this story speaks to you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe for more of the journey. Trust me, the next chapter is just around the corner. After that conversation with Emily, I thought the hardest part was over. It felt like we had said everything that needed to be said, and that was supposed to bring us closure. But life, as it often does, threw one final twist into the mix. A few days after we met in the park, I was at home, sorting through the emotions of the past few months, when I received an unexpected call. It was from Claire, the one person who had been there for me through all of this. "David, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice shaking. "It's about Emily." My heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" "You need to hear this from me," Claire continued. "I didn't want to get involved, but I think you deserve to know the truth. Emily, she's been seeing someone. Not just Ben, but someone else. Someone you don't know about." I felt my blood run cold. The world seemed to slow down as I processed her words. "What do you mean, someone else?" "David, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to tell you this, but I think you need to hear it," Claire said. "Emily's been seeing him for a while now. I didn't know how to bring it up, but it's affecting everything. I think she's been lying to you." I couldn't speak for a moment. The room felt like it was spinning. This wasn't just a simple mistake or miscommunication. This was a betrayal that went deeper than anything I had imagined. Emily had been hiding this from me. She had apologized, confessed to the mistakes she had made, but she hadn't told me the whole truth. "I thought she was trying to make things right," I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper. "I thought we were moving forward." Claire's voice softened. I know, but sometimes things aren't as simple as they seem, and I think you need to confront her. You deserve to know what's really been going on." I couldn't sit still. My mind was racing. How could she do this? After everything we'd been through, after all the pain we had already caused each other. How could Emily betray me like this again? The anger was building inside me, but so was the hurt, the confusion. How could I have been so blind? How had I missed this? I had worked so hard to accept our breakup, to move on. But now this new revelation was like the rug being pulled out from under me once again. I hung up with Claire, my hands trembling, and I knew what I had to do. I had to confront Emily. I couldn't let this slide. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the situation any longer. The next evening, I found myself standing outside her apartment building, staring up at the window of the place we had once shared so many memories. I didn't know what to expect. Was she home? Would she tell me the truth? Or would she deny it? I took a deep breath and pressed the doorbell. The wait felt like an eternity, but soon enough, I heard footsteps approaching. The door opened, and there she was, Emily. But she wasn't the same woman I had seen a few days ago. There was something different in her eyes. A guardedness, a distance. "David," she started, her voice unsure. "What are you doing here?" "I know about him, Emily," I said, my voice tight. "I know about Ben. And I know there's someone else. Don't lie to me. She froze, her eyes widening for a moment before she tried to regain control. David, please, she began, but I interrupted her. No, I said, stepping into her apartment, my anger and hurt overwhelming me. You don't get to explain this away. You told me we needed to let go, that we needed to heal, but you've been hiding the truth from me the entire time. You've been with someone else and you never told me. You lied. Her face fell, the walls she had so carefully built up crumbling in an instant. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. She seemed lost, caught between guilt and something else. Something I didn't understand. I didn't mean for this to happen, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. But, David, I don't know how to explain this. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. I shot back, the frustration in my voice rising. You hurt me more than I thought was possible. I don't even know who you are anymore. You've been lying to me this whole time, and now you expect me to just forgive you. She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to understand. I didn't know how to get out of this mess. I thought I was doing the right thing by staying away from you. I didn't want to hurt you any more than I already had. I took a step back, trying to steady myself. The words, the accusations, everything was swirling in my head. I had been so sure that this time, this break from our toxic cycle was the right choice. But now everything I had believed was in question. Was Emily ever truly committed to the relationship? Or had I been the one holding on to something that was already gone? I didn't know what to say. There was no way to come back from this. No words that could fix this level of betrayal. And I knew, deep down, that I had to make a decision. A hard one. I can't keep doing this, I said, my voice steady but pained. I can't keep fighting for something that isn't there. I have to let you go. I have to let us go. She looked at me, her eyes full of tears. David, please, don't leave me like this. I never meant for it to end like this. No. I cut her off, my voice shaking. It's too late. I can't be here anymore. I need to find my own way forward. I need to be alone. For once, I need to be free from this pain. And with that, I turned and walked out of the apartment. As I left, I felt a strange calm wash over me. It wasn't the resolution I had hoped for. It wasn't the closure I had wanted. But it was the clarity I needed. Emily had made her choices, and it was time for me to make mine. It was time to let go. I stepped out into the night, the cool air biting at my skin, but inside, I felt a new sense of freedom. The weight of the past was lifting. The anger, the hurt, they were still there, but they no longer had a hold on me. I had faced the truth, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally free. Ready to move on to the next chapter? Don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Your thoughts mean the world to me, and I'll see you in the next part of this journey. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. Walking away from Emily wasn't easy, but there was a finality to it that made everything feel strangely calm. As I stepped into the unknown, I thought I had already faced the hardest part. But I was wrong. I had no idea what kind of battle I was about to face. The weight of betrayal, the pain of the lies, and the constant second-guessing. I thought I could push it all aside and focus on healing, on rebuilding myself. But that night, something shifted. The intensity of the truth hit me like a freight train. I had confronted Emily, and yet, something was still missing. A part of me couldn't move forward because I hadn't fully faced the damage she'd caused. What that relationship had cost me. I spent the next few days reflecting on everything that had happened, letting the thoughts swirl in my mind. I couldn't stop asking myself the same questions. Why didn't I see this coming? How had I allowed myself to ignore the cracks in our relationship? I had given so much of myself to Emily, but I hadn't seen how much I had lost in the process. How could I not see that I was losing myself? Then the phone rang. I looked at the caller ID and froze. It was Emily. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to pick up. Hello, David, she said, her voice trembling. I need to talk to you. There was something in her tone. a mix of desperation and regret that I hadn't heard before. For a moment I considered hanging up, but something inside me told me to listen. Maybe it was the final conversation we needed to have. Maybe it was just another attempt at closure. Either way, I knew I couldn't avoid it anymore. "I'm listening," I said, my voice steady, but underneath, there was an unmistakable edge of anger. "I messed up, David," she continued, her voice shaky. "I should have told you everything. I shouldn't have let you go without being completely honest with you. But I didn't know how to face you. I didn't know how to face myself." I felt a knot form in my stomach. What could she possibly say to explain what she had done? The things she had hidden from me? And why was she calling me now, after everything that had happened? "You called me to say what, Emily?" I asked, trying to keep my composure. "That you made a mistake? That you've been lying to me for months? What's the point of any of this?" I walked away because I couldn't trust you anymore. There was a long pause, and for a moment I thought she might hang up. But then she spoke again, her voice softer now. "I'm not asking you to trust me, David," she said quietly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness either. I just need to tell you what happened. I need you to know the whole truth. Not for you, for me." I felt a flicker of hesitation, but I decided to let her speak. Maybe this was the answer I had been searching for. Maybe it would help me finally let go. She took a deep breath before continuing. "When we first broke up, I was devastated, but I didn't have the courage to face the reality of what I had done. I didn't want to deal with the guilt, so I started pushing people away, including you. I thought if I ran away from it all, I could forget. But that only made things worse. And then, Ben came into the picture. I felt the sharp sting of jealousy and hurt, but I tried to keep my emotions in check. "You already told me about Ben," I reminded her, my voice tight. "What else is there?" Emily sighed deeply, as though this next part was the hardest thing she had ever admitted. "I wasn't honest with you about Ben, David. I told you he was just a colleague. But it wasn't just that. We got closer. I started confiding in him. And one night it went too far. We slept together. Couldn't breathe. I had suspected it, sure, but hearing it from her lips was like a punch to the gut. I had been so sure that our marriage meant something, that it was built on trust, on loyalty. But it felt like she had taken everything we built and shattered it in one moment. "Emily, how could you?" I finally choked out, my voice barely a whisper. "After everything we went through, after all the pain, how could you do that to me?" Her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, David. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought if I ran away from my problems, I could escape it all. But I was just running from myself. I never wanted to hurt you, and I never meant for it to go this far." The silence between us was deafening. I wanted to scream, to rage against everything she had done, but I just couldn't. The air between us was thick with the weight of everything we had said, everything we had been through. I wanted answers, but part of me knew that no matter how many explanations she gave me, it wouldn't change the fact that I had been betrayed. "Why now?" I finally managed to ask. "Why are you telling me this now?" "I'm telling you because I need to face it," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been living with this guilt, and I've realized that I can't keep running. I can't keep hiding from what I did to you. I just want you to know everything. I don't want to lie anymore." It felt like the floor beneath me had just been ripped away. How could she expect me to accept this? After everything we had shared, everything we had built, how could she betray me like this? I thought we were stronger than that. But now, I realized that I had been holding on to a version of her that no longer existed. "Emily, I don't know what to say to you anymore," I said, my voice cracking. "I can't fix this. I can't make it right." "I know," she whispered. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to hear it from me, to hear the truth." And with that, the conversation ended. I stood there, staring at my phone, unable to move. The truth was out. The weight of it, the pain, the anger, it all seemed to crash down on me in that moment. I had been trying to find closure, trying to understand, but the truth had only torn open old wounds that I wasn't sure could ever heal. I walked outside, the cool night air biting at my skin. It felt surreal, like I was trapped in some terrible dream I couldn't wake up from. Everything I had believed in, everything I thought I knew about love and trust, had been shattered. The betrayal was deeper than I had ever imagined. But even in the midst of the pain, something inside me shifted. The anger was still there, but it wasn't consuming me the way it had before. I had been through the worst of it, and now I had to find a way to rebuild. Not just my life, but my own sense of self. I couldn't keep holding on to the past, to a version of Emily that no longer existed. It was time to let go. Ready to move on to the next chapter? Don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Your thoughts are always appreciated. And be sure to subscribe for the next step in this journey. The days after my conversation with Emily were a whirlwind. The pain of the betrayal still lingered, but with each passing day, I could feel myself starting to change. The anger was still there, simmering just beneath the surface, but it wasn't consuming me anymore. I had spent so much of my life wrapped up in someone else's mistakes, trying to fix what was broken. But I couldn't do that anymore. I had to focus on myself. I threw myself into work, reestablishing my own purpose and moving forward. I started making small decisions that were just for me, things I had ignored for far too long. I picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends, and found peace in the little things. It wasn't an instant fix, but slowly, the weight of the past started to feel less heavy. I could see the world around me again, not through the lens of betrayal, but through the lens of new possibilities. The hardest part was reconciling the person I had been with the person I was becoming. I had let the pain, the heartbreak, and the anger define me for so long that I couldn't even remember who I was without them. But the more I focused on myself, the more I started to remember. I was capable of growth. I was capable of healing. And that was something I had forgotten. I never thought that I could walk away from Emily and truly heal, but in the end, I did. I realized that forgiveness, while important, wasn't about letting someone back into your life. It was about letting go of the hold they had on your heart, no matter how hard it seemed. I could forgive Emily, but I didn't have to go back to the person I once was with her. We had both changed, and maybe that was the only real answer all along. Months passed. I threw myself into new projects, started making plans for the future, and embraced the uncertainty with open arms. I was no longer afraid of what came next. What I had feared most, the unknown, became the very thing that pushed me to live more authentically, to embrace new challenges, and to finally trust myself. Then one day I received a letter. It was from Emily. The handwriting was familiar, but the words inside were not what I expected. She wasn't asking for reconciliation. She wasn't trying to explain herself. It was simply a letter of thanks. "I wanted to thank you," she wrote, "for showing me what real love and trust look like. I don't think I ever understood that until I lost you. But in the end, I'm thankful. You helped me find myself even though it hurt. I don't know what the future holds, but I wanted you to know that I am grateful for everything you taught me." I sat there for a long time holding the letter in my hands. I felt something stir inside me, something that had been buried for so long. It wasn't anger or bitterness. It wasn't even sadness. It was a strange sense of peace. Emily had come to terms with everything just as I had. And in that moment, I realized that we both needed to let go, not just of each other, but of the past that had kept us trapped for so long. The letter marked the end of our story, not with grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but with a quiet, mutual understanding. We had both learned the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to walk away, to let go, and to rebuild from the ground up. As for me, I continued on my journey. I met new people, explored new places, and took on new challenges. I wasn't the person I had been when I first met Emily, and I was okay with that. I was different now, stronger, more self-aware, and more capable of finding peace within myself. I learned to live without the need for validation from others, and I started to embrace my own potential. The hardest part of the entire process wasn't the heartbreak. It wasn't the betrayal. It was the moment I had to face the truth about myself, the person I had allowed myself to become in the name of love. But once I had accepted that, once I had forgiven myself and let go of the anger, I was free. And so, the story of Emily and me came to its natural end. We had both moved on, in different ways, but we had moved on. The final chapter of our shared history wasn't about the pain we caused each other, but about the lessons we had learned and the strength we had found within ourselves. As I sat back and reflected on everything, I realized that life wasn't just about surviving. It was about living, really living. It was about embracing the future, even when it seemed uncertain. It was about growth, about learning to let go of the things that weighed you down, and about trusting that whatever came next would be better than what had come before. The story wasn't just about the pain of the past. It was about the possibility of the future. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited about what lay ahead. And there you have it, the story of a man learning to let go of the past in order to embrace a future that was his own. The journey wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And sometimes that's all we can ask for. If you found yourself in a situation like this, where you've had to let go of someone you thought you'd spend forever with, know that you're not alone. And if you've learned anything from this story, let it be this. You're strong enough to rebuild your life, to find your own way forward. I hope this story resonated with you. If you've been through something similar, share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to my channel for more stories and lessons on life, love, and growth. Thanks for watching and take care.